The pitchfork slipped from Mary Beth Thompson's trembling hands, clattering against the barn floor. Blood seeped through her cotton dress, dark, warm, spreading fast. She pressed her palm against her abdomen where the pain had turned from dull ache to searing fire, but kept moving. 14 stalls. She'd promised to clean 14 stalls. The gelding in the corner stall kicked the gate, nostrils flaring. Outside, male voices drifted through the morning heat. $5 says the fat girl don't last till noon. Laughter. Her vision blurred. The manure fork felt like lead in her blistered hands, but she drove it into another pile. The clock on the wall read 6:00 a.m., 95 degrees already. Her mother had maybe 12 hours left without that $50. A shadow fell across the doorway, massive, broad-shouldered, unmoving. The voice came low and cold as creek water in January. "What the hell are you doing in my barn?" Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Mary Beth scrambled backward too fast. Her boots slipped in the fresh manure, and she went down hard, chin cracking against the stall gate. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. She tried to speak, to explain, but her throat constricted. Her fingers fumbled in her dress pocket for the paper, the contract, but it was soaked through with sweat and something worse. Blood. Her blood. The man filled the doorway like a storm cloud. Caleb Hartwell. Everyone in Red Creek knew that name. Knew to stay clear of his property. Knew he hadn't spoken more than 10 words to anyone since his daughter. He stepped forward. She flinched, but he didn't yell, didn't grab her. He bent down and picked up the crumpled paper from where it had fallen. His jaw worked as he read it, a muscle twitching beneath his beard. Clean 14 stalls, payment 50 cents. Signed H. Pierce. Mary Beth's eyes darted to the clock. 6:17. The hospital closed intake at 6 p.m. Her mother needed $50 by then, or they'd move her to the county morgue, not the county hospital. The morgue, because that's where people without money went to die. "I can do it," she whispered. "I can finish. Please don't send me away." Outside, boots scraped against dirt. 7 men now, maybe more. Billy Thornton's voice carried clear. "Hartwell's gonna throw her out any second. Tom owes me $3 when he does." More laughter. The sound of coins changing hands. Caleb's eyes stayed on the paper. On Harlan Pierce's signature. His knuckles went white around the edges. When he finally looked at Mary Beth, something shifted in his expression. Not pity, something harder. "How much does your mother owe him?" $847.32. The number burned in her mind like a brand. He gave her $400 when she was dying. "Now it's the interest," he said. 200% annually. Caleb's voice could have cut glass. That's his standard rate. He moved closer. Mary Beth squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for his hand to close around her arm, to drag her toward the jeering crowd outside. Instead, his calloused palm settled on her shoulder. Gentle. Steadying. "You're bleeding. When did you eat last?" Caleb didn't ask permission. He wrapped his hand around her upper arm, firm but not rough, and pulled her toward the house. Mary Beth's legs barely held her weight. The kitchen was darker than the barn. Cooler. He pushed her into a chair and moved to the cupboard without a word. A tin of condensed milk. Half a loaf of bread, hard at the edges. He dropped them on the table between them like a challenge. Eat. Mary Beth's hands shook too badly to open the tin. He took it from her, punched 2 holes in the top with a knife, and pushed it back. She drank. The sweetness made her stomach cramp, but she forced down 3 swallows before her eyes adjusted to the dim room. 4 chairs around the table. Only one showed any wear, the varnish rubbed thin on the arms, the seat cushion compressed. The other 3 wore thick layers of dust. Her gaze caught on the chair directly across from Caleb's, words carved into the headrest, Emma's chair, 1872. Below it, added later in a shakier hand, died 1872, the same year. Born and died. No, not born. The chair was child-sized, meant for someone older. Mary Beth looked at the only photograph on the wall, a girl, maybe 15, with Caleb's dark eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Caleb followed her gaze, then turned away to the sink. While his back was turned, Mary Beth saw the drawer he'd left open, papers stuffed inside haphazardly. On top, red ink stamped across official letterhead, overdue tax notice, 3200 final warning. $3,000. For a man who owned a ranch this size, that should have been nothing. But the drawer held more notices, all unpaid, dating back years. You're staring. Caleb didn't turn around. Sorry. She looked down at the bread, forced herself to tear off a piece. Finish that, then get out. The words landed like stones. Mary Beth nodded, swallowing past the tightness in her throat. Of course. She'd trespassed, bled on his floor, wasted his time. She stood, legs steadier now, and moved toward the door. Then stopped, turned back. The stalls. I can finish them. I know you didn't ask for this, but I'm here, and I can work, and I said get out. Please. The word cracked. I have 8 hours before the hospital, before my mother. I can't go back empty-handed. Mr. Pierce said if I cleaned all 14, he'd forgive $50 of the debt. I know it's not much, but it's something, and I can do it. I swear I can. Caleb's jaw worked. He stared at her for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the barn. Do what you want. It wasn't permission, but it wasn't refusal either. Mary Beth returned to the barn, her hands still trembling but steadier than before. She picked up the pitchfork and started on stall number 8, no, stall number 7. She'd finish that one first. The work came easier when she stopped thinking. Scoop, toss, spread fresh hay. Her body knew the rhythm, even if her mind wandered. Her mother had taught her years ago, back when they'd had their own horse, before the sickness, before the debts. When she reached the water trough in stall 7, she found it crusted with algae. She scrubbed it clean, humming without realizing an old song. Words in a language her mother had taught her, but never explained. Apache, she'd said once, from a friend who'd shown her kindness when no one else would. The black gelding in the next stall, the one that had been kicking earlier, went quiet. Its ears pricked forward. Mary Beth kept humming as she worked, the melody filling the spaces between her breathing. She moved to stall 8's door. The gelding pressed its nose against her palm through the bars. Outside, gravel crunched, boots, multiple sets. Billy Thornton's voice rang out. Still hear Hartwell, you going soft on us, laughter. The sound of something hitting the barn's outer wall, rotten fruit, maybe, through a gap in the boards. Mary Beth saw Caleb standing in the doorway of his house. saw his hand move to something mounted beside the door, a rifle. His fingers wrapped around the stock. But then his hand fell away. He stepped back inside. Let the door close. The jeering continued. Mary Beth's throat tightened. But she kept working, moved to stall 8. She pulled the latch and pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, darkness. She stepped forward, waited for her eyes to adjust. Then she saw it. A rope. Thick hemp, hanging from the crossbeam. One end tied in a perfect loop, a noose. Below it, deep gouges in the floorboards, like something had thrashed. Struggled. Don't go in there. Caleb's voice came from directly behind her. Close enough she could feel the heat of him. That stall stays closed. Mary Beth stepped back from the doorway. The rope swayed slightly in the draft, casting thin shadows across the gouged floor. Caleb pulled the door shut. The latch clicked like a gunshot. Skip that one. Do the rest. He walked away before she could respond. Mary Beth stood frozen for a moment, then turned to stall 9. Her hands found the rhythm again. Scoop, toss, breathe. By noon, she'd finished 12 stalls. Her dress clung to her back, soaked through with sweat, and the blood had stopped spreading, but the fabric was stiff with it. The pain in her abdomen had dulled to a persistent throb. She was reaching for the pitchfork again when Caleb appeared in the barn entrance. Stop. She straightened. I can finish. Just 2 more. I said stop. He crossed the space between them and held out an envelope. $5. For today? Mary Beth stared at it. But I didn't finish, and Mr. Pierce only promised 50 cents. Pierce is a liar and a thief. You did more work in 6 hours than any man I've hired in 5 years. He pushed the envelope into her hand. Take it. $5. 1/10 of what she needed. But it was something. More than something. I can come back tomorrow, she said quickly. And the day after. 10 days, and I'll have enough. Your mother doesn't have 10 days. The words hit like cold water. Mary Beth's fingers crumpled the envelope. No, she doesn't. Caleb studied her face. Whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. Come on. What, I'll drive you into town? He didn't wait for agreement, just turned and headed for the wagon. Mary Beth followed, her mind spinning. The jeering crowd had dispersed, probably gone to the saloon to drink away their betting losses. The wagon ride was silent except for the creak of wheels and the steady clip of hooves. Mary Beth kept the envelope clutched in both hands. $5. Not enough. Not nearly enough. When they reached town, Caleb didn't stop at her boarding house. He drove straight to the hospital and pulled the brake. Wait here. He disappeared inside. Mary Beth sat frozen, afraid to hope, afraid to move. Through the window, she could see her mother in one of the charity beds, gray-faced, barely breathing. Caleb emerged 10 minutes later. He climbed back onto the wagon, pulled out a second envelope, and handed it to her. $50. Give it to the clerk. Tell them it's for your mother's care for the next 2 weeks. Mary Beth's vision blurred. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The envelope trembled in her hands. Why? She finally whispered. Caleb didn't look at her. Just pay the damn bill. She stumbled into the hospital. Dr. Harper took the money with raised eyebrows, but asked no questions. Your mother is stable now, he said. This buys her time. Real treatment, not just morphine. She's got a chance. When Mary Beth came back out, her face was wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. Caleb said nothing on the drive to her boarding house, but when he stopped, he spoke. You know where the ranch is. If you want the work, come back tomorrow, 6 a.m. I'll pay proper wages. That night, Mary Beth slept for the first time in weeks. She returned at 5:30 the next morning, carrying a cloth bundle. Inside cornbread she'd made from the last of her flour rations, and 2 apples she'd bought with the coins left in her pocket. Caleb was already in the barn, mucking stalls. He looked up when she entered, something unreadable crossing his face. You're early. Wanted to finish the last 2 stalls? She held out the bundle. And I brought breakfast. It's not much. He stared at the offering for a long moment, then took it, unwrapped it, ate every crumb of the cornbread without speaking. When he finished, he handed her back the cloth. Thank you. 2 words, but they felt like more. They worked side by side that morning. Mary Beth in stalls 13 and 14, Caleb repairing a broken gate. The black gelding, the one that had been wild yesterday, stood calm in its stall, watching her with curious eyes. She was singing again without thinking. That same Apache melody. Where did you learn that? Mary Beth startled. Caleb stood in the aisle, hammer in hand. My mother taught me. She learned it from a teacher when she was young, someone who showed her kindness when... She trailed off. When people weren't kind. Before Caleb could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Both of them turned. An old man dismounted from a paint horse Apache, clearly, his face weathered like canyon stone. He moved with the careful dignity of age and walked straight to Caleb. Nantan. Caleb's voice held respect. It's been months. The old man's eyes shifted to Mary Beth, held there. His expression changed, sharpened with recognition, though they'd never met. She sings the old tongue. It wasn't a question. Who taught her? Her mother. Caleb said. Nantan stepped closer to Mary Beth, studied her face. What is your mother's name? Child Sarah Thompson. Something passed over the old man's features. Sadness, understanding. I knew someone who would have taught a woman named Sarah, my granddaughter. She died many years ago. But before that, she taught poor children in secret. White children whose families had nothing. He turned back to Caleb. The girl who sang these songs to Emma. Before Emma died, that was my granddaughter. The barn went silent except for the soft shuffling of horses. Mary Beth's breath caught. Emma, the girl in the photograph. Nantan nodded slowly. This one carries her music. The spirits are not done with this place. A wagon clattered into the yard. Fast, angry. Mary Beth recognized it before she saw the driver. Harlan Pierce jumped down, his face red with fury. Behind him, Sheriff Coleman sat on horseback, hand resting on his gun belt. Harlan stormed toward them, waving a paper. Caleb Hartwell, you violated our contract. That girl owes me money, not you. She's mine until the debt is paid. Harlan slammed the paper onto the wagon bed. A crowd was already gathering, drawn by the commotion like flies to carrion. Billy Thornton, Mrs. Hargrove from the church, the saloon owner. Within minutes, 20 people lined the fence. This girl signed a debt contract. Harlan's voice carried across the yard. She owes me $897 total. That's the original 400 plus interest, 200% annually, compounded over 6 months while her mama was too sick to work. Mary Beth's stomach dropped. But you said 400. You said, I said I'd lend 400. The terms were clear. He thrust another paper at her. Her signature sprawled across the bottom, shaky and desperate. She remembered signing it at the hospital, while her mother convulsed, while the doctor said without medicine she'd be dead by morning. She'd signed anything, everything, and that's not all. Harlan turned to Caleb with a smile that showed too many teeth. The contract stipulates that if Miss Thompson defaults, which she has, by accepting payment from another party, the debt transfers. You paid her $50 yesterday. Hartwell, that makes you liable for the full amount. That's not legal, Caleb said quietly. Oh, but it is. Sheriff Coleman witnessed the contract. It's binding under territorial law. Harlan pulled out a third document. You have two choices. Either she works off the debt 10 years at standard servant wages, or you pay me $897 immediately. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. Plus, Harlan continued, there's the matter of your property taxes, $3,200, overdue by 14 months. I've purchased the lien from the county. So really, Caleb, you owe me $4,097 total. If you can't pay by sundown tomorrow, Sheriff Coleman will seize this property. Caleb's face had gone white. His hands hung at his sides, empty. You planned this? Mary Beth breathed. You sent me here knowing. I sent you here to teach Caleb Hartwell a lesson he should have learned 15 years ago. Harlan's smile vanished. Some people don't deserve mercy. Some people deserve to watch everything they love get taken away. What are you talking about? Mary Beth looked between them. Nantan spoke from where he stood near the barn. Tell her, Hartwell. Tell her what this man did. Caleb's jaw worked. He stared at the ground. Harlan laughed a sound like breaking glass. He won't tell you, fine. I will. 15 years ago, Caleb's daughter Emma got sick, real sick. Fever, infection, needed medicine immediately. Caleb came to my store. I owned the only pharmacy for 50 miles and begged me to extend credit. Said he'd pay double within the month. He paused, making sure everyone could hear. I said no. Business is business. The girl died 3 days later. And this coward, he pointed at Caleb. This coward blamed me for his failure to provide for his family. Tried to have me arrested for refusing humanitarian aid. Can you imagine arrested for not giving away my inventory? The crowd shifted. A few nodded. Mrs. Hargrove clucked her tongue. A man can't be forced to run a charity, she said. Mary Beth felt sick. She looked at Caleb, saw the truth carved into every line of his face, the empty chairs, the closed stall, the rope. She didn't die of fever. Nantan said softly. Tell them how she really died. She killed herself. Harlan snapped. Hung herself in that barn because she was weak. Just like her father. You. Caleb's voice came out strangled. He took a step forward. Sheriff Coleman's hand went to his gun. That's far enough. Hartwell. Caleb stopped. His whole body shook with restraint. Mary Beth understood then. Why Caleb lived alone. Why he never went to town. Why he'd helped her a stranger without question. He saw Emma in her, another girl being destroyed by Harlan's greed. But he wasn't going to fight. He was frozen, trapped in the same paralysis that had kept him from saving his daughter. I'll go, Mary Beth said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I'll work off the debt. Don't make him pay. Too late for that. Harlan gestured to the sheriff. She already violated the contract by accepting outside payment. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll drop the claim against Hartwell if he gives me the ranch. Today, right now. No, Mary Beth said. You can't. I can, and I will, unless he signs. The crowd had grown to 40 people now. This was entertainment, a public execution without blood. Caleb stood motionless. Mary Beth waited for him to speak, to fight, to do something. He did nothing. Fine, she whispered. She turned and walked toward the road. Behind her, someone started clapping, then another. The applause spread like disease. She made it 50 yards before Sheriff Coleman rode up beside her. Mary Beth Thompson, you're under arrest. She stopped. For what? Theft. Caleb Hartwell reported you stole $50 from his home. That's a lie, he gave it to me. Coleman dismounted and pulled out iron shackles. That's not what Mr. Pierce says. And Mr. Pierce is a respected businessman. You're a debtor with a history of fraud. I never... The shackles closed around her wrists. Cold metal. Tighter than necessary. Coleman dragged her back through the crowd. Mary Beth saw Caleb standing in the same spot, staring at nothing. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to beg him to speak up. He said nothing. They threw her in the town jail, a wooden shed behind the sheriff's office, 10 by 10 feet, no windows, just a slot in the door for passing food. Through the gap, she heard voices. Harlan and Coleman, counting money, laughing. Tomorrow we'll auction her labor contract, Harlan said. 10 years of service. Should fetch a good price. Maybe the saloon will buy her. Good for business, having something for the men to laugh at. The slot closed. Darkness swallowed everything. Mary Beth sank onto the dirt floor. Her hand found her dress pocket. The small paring knife she'd used to slice the apples that morning was still there. She'd forgotten to give it back. She pulled it out, even in the darkness. She could feel the sharpness of the blade. Outside, a clock tower chimed. 6 p.m. Her mother had 2 weeks, but Mary Beth wouldn't be there to see them. She pressed the knife against her wrist and closed her eyes. The knife edge rested against Mary Beth's skin. Cold, sharp. In the absolute darkness of the cell, she couldn't see the blade, but she felt it. One quick pull and the pain would stop. The shame, the crushing weight of being a burden to everyone she'd ever known. Her mother would understand, maybe even be relieved. The thought made her press harder. A bead of warmth traced down her wrist. Then she heard it, singing, faint from outside the cell. The old Apache melody her mother had taught her. The one she'd hummed in Caleb's barn. But the voice wasn't hers. It was Nantan. The old man sat just beyond the door, his back against the wood. She could hear him clearly through the gap at the bottom. He sang the whole song through, then spoke in English, his accent thick but clear. My granddaughter sang that song the night before she died. She was teaching children your mother was one of them. She said, "These songs keep souls tethered when the darkness comes." I did not understand then. I understand now. Mary Beth's hand trembled. The knife slipped slightly. You think you are alone? Nantan continued. You think dying will ease the burden, but you carry something precious, something my granddaughter gave to your mother. your mother gave to you. If you die, the song dies, and Emma's memory dies with it. Emma, the girl in the photograph. The rope in stall 8. She fought the darkness too, Nantan said softly. She lost. But you haven't lost yet, child. Not yet. The knife clattered to the floor. Mary Beth pressed her face against the dirt and sobbed great, wrenching sounds that tore from her chest. She cried until no more tears would come, until her throat was raw, until exhaustion pulled her under. When she woke, pale light filtered through the door slot. Morning. Day 4. The slot opened. A tin cup of water and a piece of hardtack bread appeared. No words. The slot closed again. Mary Beth drank, ate. Her wrist had stopped bleeding, just a shallow scratch. She lost her nerve at the last moment. Or Nantan had saved her. Maybe both. At 9 o'clock, footsteps approached, many of them. The door swung open. Sunlight blinded her. Sheriff Coleman grabbed her arm and hauled her out into the street. A platform had been erected in the town square. Rough wooden planks, waist high, with a post in the center. A sign hung above it. Labor auction, Mary Beth Thompson, 10 years indentured service. Mary Beth's legs wouldn't move. Coleman dragged her forward and shoved her onto the platform. The crowd pressed close, 50 people, maybe more. She recognized faces from church, the baker, the school teacher. People who'd smiled at her mother before the sickness. They weren't smiling now. Harlan stood beside the platform, holding a wooden gavel. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Miss Thompson here owes a debt she cannot pay. Under territorial law, we are authorized to auction her labor contract. Starting bid, $100 for 10 years of service. 100. Billy Thornton shouted from the front. His grin was vicious. I'll make her clean outhouses for every family in town. Laughter rippled through the crowd. 150, Mrs. Hargrove's voice cut through. The church could use someone for the truly degrading work. Devil's wages for devil's spawn. 200. The saloon owner waved his hat. She'd be prime entertainment. The men need something to laugh at between drinks. Each bid felt like a fist to Mary Beth's stomach. She swayed on her feet. The pain in her abdomen had returned, sharper now, spreading like fire through her pelvis. 200 going once. Wait! Nantan's voice rang out. The old man pushed through the crowd, holding something above his head, a yellowed envelope. Before you sell this girl, Caleb Hartwell should know the truth. The crowd turned. Caleb stood at the very back, half hidden behind the butcher's shop. Mary Beth hadn't even known he was there. What truth, old man? Harlan's smile tightened. We don't have time for Apache fairy tales. This is no tale? Nantan climbed onto the platform. His movements were slow but deliberate. He opened the envelope and pulled out a letter. 15 years ago, when Emma Hartwell died, her father sent a letter to the territorial marshal. He reported Harlan Pierce for refusing life-saving medicine to a child. He requested a full investigation. The crowd murmured. Harlan's face flushed red. That letter never arrived at the marshal's office. Nantan continued. But I have a copy. I was working as a translator at the courthouse then. I saw Sheriff Coleman take the original letter and burn it. I heard Harlan Pierce pay him $50 to make it disappear. Sheriff Coleman's hand went to his gun. That's slander, old man. Is it? Nantan held up the letter. The paper was brittle with age, but the writing was clear. This is Caleb Hartwell's handwriting, his signature. Dated August 15th, 1872. 3 days after Emma died. He began to read aloud. The letter detailed everything. Harlan's refusal of medicine. Emma's suffering. The fever that turned to delirium. And something more, something Mary Beth hadn't known. Emma didn't kill herself, Nantan said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. She died trying to get help. She walked 6 miles to the next town in 100-degree heat, delirious with fever, hoping to find medicine. She collapsed in Harlan Pierce's barn and died there. Harlan found her body and staged it to look like suicide so no one would question his refusal to help. The crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, denials. Lies. Harlan grabbed for the letter, but Nantan held it high. All lies from a savage. Who? I saw Emma's body, Nantan said quietly. I prepared her for burial because no white person would touch her. The marks on her neck were wrong for hanging. The rope burns ran horizontal, not vertical. She was strangled first, then hung to hide it. Who would? Someone shouted. Sheriff Coleman. Nantan turned to the lawman. You helped cover it up. You were there when she died. She knew about the burned letter. She was going to tell her father. You couldn't let that happen. Coleman's face went gray. His hand trembled on his gun. You can't prove. I kept evidence. Hair. Fabric from under her fingernails. I gave it to the new territorial marshal 6 months ago. He's been investigating quietly. Nantan smiled without humor. He arrives tomorrow. The world tilted. Mary Beth's vision blurred at the edges. The pain in her abdomen spiked white hot. Unbearable. She looked down. Blood soaked through her dress, dark, spreading fast. The tumor. It had ruptured completely. She tried to speak but only managed to whisper, "Help!" Then her legs gave out. She collapsed on the platform, blood pooling beneath her. Someone screamed. The crowd surged backward. Dr. Harper pushed through, took one look, and went pale. She needs surgery immediately. The growth has hemorrhaged. If we don't operate in the next hour, she'll bleed to death internally. How much? Caleb's voice cut through the chaos. He was moving forward now, shoving people aside. How much for the surgery? $200. Maybe more if there are complications. Caleb reached the platform, looked down at Mary Beth. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Blood seeped between the boards. Harlan stepped between them. She's still under contract to me. If you pay for her surgery, you're interfering with my property rights. I'll sue you for every penny you have left. Then sue me. Caleb's voice was flat, dead. I'll sign over the ranch. Everything. Just let her live. Caleb. No. Mary Beth's voice was barely audible. The ranch is worth $50,000, Harlan said slowly. You'd trade all that for her, this fat, worthless girl who'll probably die anyway. Caleb looked at Harlan. Really looked at him. Something in his expression made the crowd fall silent. You took my daughter, Caleb said quietly. You won't take her. He pulled a deed from his coat pocket. He'd brought it with him. Mary Beth realized. He'd known what choice he'd have to make. His hand shook as he held it out. Harlan snatched it, already grinning. Caleb's signature dried on the deed before Dr. Harper finished loading Mary Beth onto a stretcher. Harlan folded the paper with exaggerated care and tucked it into his vest pocket. Still grinning. Pleasure doing business. Hartwell. You have until sunset tomorrow to clear out. Caleb didn't respond. He climbed into the back of the doctor's wagon beside Mary Beth's unconscious form. Blood soaked through the blanket they'd wrapped her in. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Drive fast, Caleb told the doctor. The hospital was 2 miles outside town. Harper's horse galloped the entire way. By the time they arrived, Mary Beth's lips had turned blue. They carried her into the surgical room. Harper looked at Caleb. This will take hours. If she survives the anesthesia, she might survive the surgery. Might. The tumor is large and it's embedded in the abdominal wall. I'll have to just save her. Harper nodded and closed the door. Caleb sank onto the bench outside the surgical room. The hallway was empty except for the smell of carbolic acid and the distant moans of other patients. He sat with his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He'd owned that ranch for 23 years, built it from nothing. Emma had been born in that house. His wife had died in that house. Every memory he had was tied to that land, and he'd signed it away in 30 seconds. He waited. 1 hour passed, then 2. The sun climbed toward noon, then began its descent. Shadows lengthened across the floor. At 3 hours, footsteps echoed down the hall. Caleb looked up. Nantan stood there, holding 2 tin cups. Steam rose from them coffee, from the smell. The old man sat beside Caleb and held out 1 cup. She lives, Nantan said. It wasn't a question. Don't know yet. They sat in silence, drank the bitter coffee. Finally, Nantan spoke. You're Emma. She was a good child, kind. My granddaughter loved teaching her. Caleb's jaw tightened. Don't. You need to hear this. Nantan set down his cup. When Emma learned the songs, she asked my granddaughter why they mattered. My granddaughter said, because someday, someone will need them. Someone drowning in darkness. And you will sing, and they will remember they are not alone. Emma's dead. She can't sing to anyone. No, but Mary Beth can. Nantan turned to face him. My granddaughter taught your daughter. Your daughter's songs were passed to Sarah Thompson when she was a girl. They studied together briefly before Emma died. Sarah taught her daughter. Now that daughter sang in your barn, and your horses heard Emma's voice again. The circle is not broken. Hartwell, it was just waiting to close. Caleb's throat felt tight. He said nothing. You gave up your home today. Nantan continued. But you saved what your daughter wanted most for her death to mean something. For her suffering to prevent another's suffering. You finished what she started. The surgical room door opened. Doctor Harper emerged, blood on his apron up to the elbows. His face was gray with exhaustion. She's alive. The tumor was massive, nearly 8 pounds. I've never seen one that size. Another day and it would have killed her. He wiped his forehead. She'll need weeks to recover. But she'll live. Caleb stood. His legs shook. Can I see her? She's still unconscious. Won't wake until tomorrow. Probably. But yes. The room was small and white. Mary Beth lay on a narrow bed, her face pale as candle wax. Someone had cleaned the blood from her skin and dressed her in a hospital gown. Her chest rose and fell steadily. Caleb pulled a chair to her bedside and sat. Watched her breathe. He stayed there through the night. Dawn came. Mary Beth's eyes opened slowly. She blinked at the ceiling, confused, then turned her head and saw Caleb. "You're still here?" she whispered. "Where else would I be?" She tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her abdomen and she gasped, falling back. "Don't move. Doctor's orders." Caleb poured water from a pitcher and held the cup to her lips. She drank. "My mother. Safe. I paid for another month of care." Tears slid down Mary Beth's temples into her hair. "You lost everything. Your home. Your land. Because of me. Not because of you. Because of Harlan." Caleb set down the cup. "I should have fought him 15 years ago. I didn't. I let him take Emma. I wasn't going to let him take you too. But now you have nothing. I have enough." He stood. "Rest. I'll be back." "Wait." Her hand caught his wrist, weak but insistent. "Thank you. For seeing me when no one else did." Caleb nodded and left. In the hallway, voices drifted from the hospital entrance. Multiple people. Caleb walked toward the sound. Billy Thornton stood in the lobby, hat in hands, shifting from foot to foot. Behind him, 3 other young men from town, the ones who'd been at the fence during the auction. Billy saw Caleb and straightened. "Mr. Hartwell, we need to talk to you. Say what you came to say. The things we did. To Miss Thompson, the jokes, the betting, throwing things." Billy's face reddened. "We were wrong, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. I know, but you should know Harlan made us do it. Not forced, exactly. But my father owes him $3,000, our farm. Harlan said if we didn't participate, he'd call in the debt early." Billy looked at the others. "Same for them. 12 families in this town are in debt to Harlan. He controls all of us. Then you're cowards." Caleb's voice was flat. "Every one of you." "Yes, sir. We are." Billy swallowed hard. "But the marshal's coming. Nantan said so. And if Harlan goes down, those debts might be voided. We want to help. Whatever you need. We'll testify. We'll work your ranch for free. Whatever it takes to make this right." Caleb studied the boy. Saw genuine shame in his face. "I don't own the ranch anymore. I signed it to Harlan yesterday." Billy's expression crumbled. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." "Mr. Hartwell." A new voice echoed through the lobby. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, weathered, with a silver marshal's badge pinned to his vest. Behind him, 2 deputies. "I'm Federal Marshal John Crawford. I'm here investigating the death of Emma Hartwell, which occurred in August 1872. His eyes were sharp, steady. "And I have questions about Harlan Pierce and Sheriff Coleman." He stepped inside. "But first, I need to speak to Miss Mary Beth Thompson. I was told she's here. She just came out of surgery." Caleb said, "She's resting. I'll wait." Crawford's gaze swept the group. "But I should tell you all something. Harlan Pierce is currently being detained. When he heard I was arriving today, he tried to flee. My deputies caught him at the county line with $50,000 in cash and several fraudulent property deeds." The air left the room. "Fraudulent." Caleb's voice came out rough. "Forged signatures, falsified debts. Including the deed you signed yesterday, he altered the terms after you signed to give himself not just the property, but mineral rights you never agreed to. The contract is invalid." Caleb sat down hard on the nearest bench. Crawford continued, We've been building a case for 6 months. Harlan Pierce has defrauded over 40 families across 3 territories. The debt contracts, the property seizures, all illegal. Everyone he's victimized will have their claims reviewed. What about Emma? The words scraped out of Caleb's throat. What about my daughter? Crawford's expression softened. That's why I'm here. New evidence suggests her death wasn't suicide. We're reopening the investigation. And Sheriff Coleman has already confessed to taking bribes. He'll face charges. Billy Thornton spoke up. Marshal, there's something you should know about the day Miss Thompson almost died. The hospital door burst open. Sarah Thompson stumbled in, supported by a nurse. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes blazed with desperate energy. Where's my daughter? They told me she had surgery. Is she alive? She's alive, ma'am, Crawford said gently. Room 4. Sarah pushed past everyone and disappeared down the hall. Moments later, a sob echoed back, joy, not grief. Crawford turned to Caleb. I need your statement about everything that happened. Start from the beginning. Caleb began to speak. Told him everything. The barn, the contract, the auction. Billy and the others added their accounts. Nantan produced his evidence, the letter, the fabric samples, the documentation of bribes. Crawford wrote it all down. When they finished, the sun was setting. This is enough, the marshal said finally. Harlan Pierce will stand trial for fraud, conspiracy, and I believe we can prove involuntary manslaughter in Emma's death. Coleman will face similar charges. He looked at Caleb. Your ranch is yours again, Mr. Hartwell, and every family who's been exploited by Pierce will get justice. Caleb couldn't speak. He just nodded. Crawford closed his notebook. There's one more thing. We found evidence that Harlan was planning something for tonight. Something big. My deputies are watching his property. But I'd recommend... An explosion shook the building. Everyone ran to the windows. In the distance, toward Caleb's ranch, orange flames lit up the darkening sky. The barn. Caleb breathed. He's burning the barn. Caleb was out the door before anyone could stop him. Crawford and his deputies ran after him. Billy and the others closed behind. The hospital stood 2 miles from the ranch, too far to reach on foot before the fire consumed everything. Billy whistled. Horses appeared from the livery stable across the street his friends had brought them. Caleb swung onto the nearest mount without saddle or reins, just grabbed the mane and kicked hard. The animal bolted. Behind him, hoofbeats thundered, Crawford and 6 others racing to keep up. The orange glow on the horizon grew brighter, angrier. Smoke billowed black against the purple dusk. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. 14 horses in that barn. 14 lives trapped in the fire Harlan had set as his final act of revenge. They crested the hill, and the full scope came into view. The barn was engulfed of flames shooting 20 feet high from the roof, licking out the windows. The heat hit him 50 yards out. 2 men stood near the tree line, watching. When they saw the riders, they ran. Get them! Crawford shouted. His deputies peeled off in pursuit. Caleb dismounted at a full run. The barn doors were chained shut from the outside. Inside, horses screamed high, terrified sounds that cut through the roar of flames. Stand back. Billy appeared beside him with an axe from the woodshed. 3 swings and the chain shattered. Caleb kicked the doors open. A wall of heat and smoke blasted out. He pulled his shirt over his nose and plunged inside. The fire had started in the hayloft and spread fast. Flames crawled across the ceiling beams. Burning hay rained down in chunks. The horses thrashed in their stalls, wild with panic. Caleb ran to the first stall and threw the latch. The mare inside bolted past him, tail singed. Second stall, third. The animals fled into the night. He moved methodically despite the heat searing his lungs, despite the smoke blinding him. Fourth stall, fifth, sixth. Someone else was in the barn now, Billy, wrestling with a jammed latch. I got this one, keep going. Seventh stall. The black gelding Marybeth had calmed. It stood frozen in the center of the stall, too terrified to move. Caleb grabbed its mane and pulled, physically dragging the animal toward the door. It finally bolted. 8 stalls cleared. 9, 10, 11. The roof groaned. A beam crashed down 10 feet to Caleb's left, sending up a shower of sparks. The heat was unbearable now. His shirt smoldered. His lungs felt like he was breathing fire. 12, 13, 14. All the stalls open. All the horses out. Except stall 8. The one that stayed closed. The one with the rope. Caleb stared at it through the smoke. That door hadn't been opened in 15 years. There was nothing inside. Just ghosts. Just memories. Let it burn. He turned toward the exit. Then he heard it. A sound beneath the roar of flames. A whinny. Weak. Terrified. Something was inside stall 8. Caleb's hands found the latch, rusted shut. He slammed his shoulder against the door, once, twice. The wood splintered and gave way. Inside the darkness, a shape moved. A horse, old, gray, skeletal thin. It stood directly beneath the rope that hung from the crossbeam, head down, resigned to death. Ghost. Emma's horse. The animal had been missing for years. Caleb had assumed it died or ran off. But it had been here, in this closed stall, living on rats and rainwater that leaked through the roof. Waiting. Jesus Christ. Caleb breathed. The horse's eyes rolled white. Too weak to run, too broken to try. Caleb moved forward. The rope hung between them, swaying in the heat. The noose, the symbol of everything he'd failed to save. He reached up and grabbed it. The hemp burned his palms, but he pulled, ripping it down from the beam. It fell in a coil at his feet. He kicked it into the corner where flames already licked the walls. The rope caught fire and curled, blackening, disintegrating. Come on, boy. Caleb's voice was hoarse. He wrapped his arms around Ghost's neck, felt every rib, every vertebra. Emma would want you to live. The ceiling beam above stall 8 cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Now. Ghost took one stumbling step, then another. Caleb pulled, half carrying the animal. They made it 5 feet when the beam gave way. It crashed down exactly where Ghost had been standing, blocking the stall entrance. Flames roared up the walls on 3 sides. They were trapped. Caleb looked around wildly. The back wall, old wood, rotted at the base from years of moisture. He kicked it. Once, twice, 3 times. The board splintered outward. Through there. He shoved Ghost toward the opening. The horse barely fit but scraped through, leaving behind strips of hide. Caleb followed, feeling splinters tear his shirt, his skin. They tumbled into the night air. 20 feet from the barn, Caleb collapsed on his knees, gasping. Ghost stood above him, swaying but alive. The barn roof collapsed inward with a roar. Sparks exploded into the sky like dying stars. The entire structure folded in on itself, taking with it the rope, the memories. 15 years of grief and guilt. Caleb. He looked up. Mary Beth ran across the yard, actually ran. Despite the surgery, despite the stitches. She wore a hospital gown and nothing else, her feet bare, her face twisted with terror. She dropped to her knees beside him. "You idiot. You could have died." He couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. Just stared at her. "I woke up and you were gone, and they said there was a fire." Her hands moved over him, checking for injuries. Her fingers came away bloody from cuts he hadn't felt. "Why did you go back in?" "All the horses were out." "Not all." Caleb looked at Ghost. The ancient horse stood silhouetted against the burning barn, head high now, nostrils flaring. Emma's horse. He was in stall 8, locked in, all these years. Mary Beth's eyes widened. She looked at the horse, then at the burning barn, then at Caleb. "You opened the stall," she whispered. "The one you couldn't open." "Had to." His voice cracked. "Couldn't let another thing die in there." She threw her arms around him. He felt her tears on his neck, or maybe they were his own. They held each other while the barn burned, while Ghost stood guard, while the past finally turned to ash. Crawford approached with his deputies. Both of Harlan's accomplices were in chains, faces soot-stained. "They confessed," the marshal said. "Harlan paid them $200 to burn your property if he was arrested. They didn't know anyone was inside." "Attempted murder," Crawford continued. "That's 20 years minimum. Added to Harlan's charges: fraud, manslaughter, conspiracy. He'll die in prison." Billy and the others had corralled the horses into the far pasture. All 14, plus Ghost. 15 animals saved. Sarah Thompson appeared, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her. She moved slowly but determinedly toward Mary Beth and Caleb. When she reached them, she looked at her daughter bleeding through her hospital gown, covered in soot, clinging to a man she barely knew, and smiled. "Your father would be proud," Sarah said softly. "You saved what needed saving." Mary Beth pulled away from Caleb, suddenly aware of how close they were, how improper this looked. But Sarah just laughed a sound like wind chimes, clear and bright despite her illness. "I'm not blind, child. I see what's happening here." She looked at Caleb. "You gave up everything for her. That's not charity. That's family." Caleb met her eyes, saw understanding there, permission. "Ma'am, I don't have much left. No barn, no savings. Just land and her." Sarah interrupted. "That's enough. That's everything." She turned and walked back toward Billy's wagon. Someone helped her up. Mary Beth and Caleb stood alone in the firelight. "I destroyed your barn," she said. If you hadn't come here, I'd still be a dead man walking." Caleb looked at the ruins. "That barn was a tomb. You helped me bury it properly. What happens now?" He looked at her, really looked at her. This girl who'd bled on his floor, sung to his horses, survived being auctioned like livestock, went under the knife, and then ran barefoot across a burning ranch to make sure he was alive. "Now we rebuild," he said. "Together, if you want. I have nothing to offer. No money, no skills, no. You have everything I need." He gestured at the horses in the pasture. "They trust you. This land needs someone who can heal things. I can't do it alone anymore." Mary Beth looked at the smoking ruins, then at the stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. Somewhere in the pasture, Ghost whinnied not in fear, but in something like hope. Okay, she whispered. Okay. The barn burned through the night. By dawn, only the stone foundation remained. But standing before it, Caleb smiled for the first time in 15 years. 3 days after the fire, Federal Marshal Crawford assembled the town in the church. Every pew was filled. People stood against the walls, spilled out onto the steps. The air hummed with nervous energy. Crawford stood at the pulpit, a stack of documents before him. Harlan Pierce has been charged with 43 counts of fraud, 1 count of manslaughter in the death of Emma Hartwell, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 counts of attempted murder. Sheriff Coleman faces 22 counts of accepting bribes and obstruction of justice. Both men are in federal custody awaiting trial. A collective exhale moved through the room. We've recovered $67,000 in cash and assets from Pierce's holdings. All fraudulent debt contracts are void. Every family affected will have their property restored and receive restitution from the seized funds. Mrs. Hargrove stood. What about those of us who didn't know who thought we were just doing business? If you were deceived, you're a victim, not a criminal. If you knowingly participated in the fraud, Crawford's eyes swept the room. We'll be conducting interviews. I suggest cooperation. Billy Thornton stood next. Marshal, I want to confess. Everything I did to Miss Thompson, the betting, the cruelty, it wasn't right, even if Harlan pressured us. I want it on record. One by one, others rose. The saloon owner, 3 ranch hands, even the baker's son. 12 people in total confessed their participation. Crawford wrote down every word. When it ended, he looked at Mary Beth, sitting in the front row beside her mother. Miss Thompson, these people have harmed you. Under territorial law, you have the right to press charges or demand compensation. What do you want? Every eye turned to her. Mary Beth stood slowly, still weak from surgery. She looked at Billy, at the others who'd made her life hell, saw genuine shame in their faces. Harlan controlled them through fear, she said quietly. Just like he controlled me. I want them to be free. All of us need to be free. You're certain. I'm certain. Crawford nodded. Then no charges will be filed against those who've confessed. But this community needs to reckon with what happened here. You let one man's greed turn you into monsters. Don't let it happen again. The church emptied slowly. People approached Mary Beth and her mother, some to apologize, some just to touch her hand. Billy stayed until the end. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right, he told her. I swear it. Then start today, Mary Beth said. Mr. Hartwell needs help rebuilding his barn. Billy's face lit up. Yes, ma'am. The barn rose from its ashes over the next 6 months. Not the same structure, this one was larger, brighter, with wide windows and a loft designed for storage, not secrets. 14 stalls, numbered 1 through 7 and 9 through 15. Stall 8 became a garden, wildflowers and native grasses. A small stone marker that read simply, Emma. Billy worked every day without pay for 3 months. Then Caleb started paying him standard wages. Within 6 months, Billy had saved enough to buy back his family's farm from the restitution fund. Sarah Thompson recovered slowly but steadily. The medicine worked. The debt was gone. She began teaching again first, just Mary Beth. Then a few children whose families couldn't afford school. Within a year, she'd opened a small schoolhouse on the edge of Caleb's property. Nantan served as a cultural advisor, teaching Apache history to students who'd never been taught anything but fear. Mary Beth healed. The surgery scar faded from angry red to pale white. She gained weight, healthy weight, and muscle from the ranch work. More importantly, she stopped flinching when people looked at her, stopped apologizing for existing. She became the ranch manager, kept the books, trained the horses, managed the workers. Caleb taught her everything he knew about the land, the animals, the seasons. She taught him how to laugh again. They never spoke about what they were to each other. Didn't need to. Everyone in Red Creek knew that Mary Beth Thompson and Caleb Hartwell were family in the way that mattered most, by choice, not blood. 5 years later, a sign went up at the ranch entrance, Hartwell Thompson Healing Ranch, where broken souls meet gentle horses. The operation had grown to 30 horses, 5 full-time employees, and a waiting list of people seeking refuge. They specialized in working with victims of violence, people with disabilities, veterans with shattered nerves. The horses, especially Ghost, now 20 years old and gentle as lamb, had a gift for sensing pain and offering comfort without words. Mary Beth Thompson, now 24, stood in the center ring teaching a group of children how to approach a nervous mare. She wore practical clothes, her hair pulled back, her face tan from sun. The girl who'd bled on a barn floor was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth. In the distance, Caleb Hartwell, 50 years old, mended a fence. His hair had gone completely silver, but his back was straight, his movements sure. Children called him Grandpa Caleb. He pretended to be annoyed, but always had peppermints in his pockets. Billy Thornton, now married with a daughter of his own, helped Caleb with the fence. They worked in comfortable silence, the way old friends do. At noon, Mary Beth rang the bell for lunch. Everyone gathered at the long tables under the cottonwood trees. Sarah Thompson brought out plates of food. Nantan told stories. Laughter rang across the property. After the meal, Caleb walked to Emma's garden. Mary Beth found him there, as she always did on this day, the anniversary of the fire. He knelt and placed wildflowers on the stone marker. She'd be 29 today, he said quietly. Would have had a family of her own, probably. Mary Beth knelt beside him. She does have a family. Everyone here. We're all Emma's legacy. Caleb smiled. She'd like that. They sat in silence, watching the horses graze in the evening light. Ghost stood among them, ancient and content, exactly where he belonged. Do you ever regret it? Mary Beth asked. Everything you lost. Caleb looked at the ranch, the new barn, the students, the life they'd built. I lost a building and some money. I gained everything else. He stood and offered his hand. She took it. Together. They walked back toward the house where Sarah waited on the porch, where laughter drifted on the wind, where every day brought someone new who needed healing. The barn they'd been sent to as a joke had become the home they were always meant to find. This story is rooted in the real history of the American West, where towns like Red Creek existed and men like Harlan Pierce controlled entire communities through debt and fear. The Hartwell Thompson Ranch operated until 1923, providing refuge for outcasts and the broken-hearted. But this isn't just history. It's happening right now in your town, your workplace, your school. How many people do you know who are one cruel joke away from giving up? How many Mary Beths walk past you every day, carrying invisible burdens while the world places bets on their failure? Here's the uncomfortable truth: Harlan Pierce wasn't a monster. He was an ordinary man who chose profit over people, again and again. until cruelty became normal. The crowd at that auction weren't villains, they were neighbors, churchgoers, parents. People who convinced themselves that silence wasn't participation. Ask yourself, would you have hired Mary Beth that morning? Would you have stood beside Caleb when it cost him everything? Or would you have been in the crowd? Watching share this story, if you believe worth isn't measured by appearance. Comment below if you've ever been the person nobody believed in, or if you've been given a second chance that changed everything. Tag someone who needs to hear you're not a burden. You're a blessing waiting to be seen. Sometimes the place you're sent as a joke becomes the home you were always meant to find.